And part of what I've contracted to do with my guides and these celestial beings is to bring in more information about the celestial energy and some of our galactic history.
Hello, Wendy. How are you?
Hello, Yannicka. I'm very well. Thank you so much for inviting me to join you today.
I'm very excited about speaking with you because I have this wall with a list of people I want to interview, and you've been there for ages. And many people have been talking about you and been like asking me to have you on my show. So I'm so excited about this.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I'm very excited. And, first, let me just say thank you because you have such an amazing body of work with all of the information and the people that you've spoken with, and you're bringing that information to so many people. So thank you for doing that.
And let's just, start by talking about how you got into channeling, because this is actually, I love this topic about our galactic family. So I'm very excited about delving into it. But for those who are new to you and don't know your story, let's hear a little bit about how you just, started channeling.
Yeah, so back in the early mid 90s, I started having these visions, and I didn't know what they were. I didn't know anybody who was channeling, and I really didn't even know what that was. And so I started researching the visions that I was having, and I thought maybe they were a past life, or they were some sort of vision that was associated with the building that I was living in. I was living in an older building in Chicago at the time. And so I started doing some research on that, and I came across channeling, and I just knew I was supposed to be doing it. And so I got a few books and I did some exercises, and I would have very visceral responses, but I was trying to channel verbally, and it wasn't happening for me. And so I'd put it aside, and then I come back to it. And it took me about a year. And in that period, I was doing a lot of work on myself. I was taking meditation classes and just really doing a lot of inner work. And one day I sat down to channel, and I knew I was supposed to have pen and paper, and I was supposed to start writing. And that's where it really kind of took off. And I did that for about 9 months or so. And then I started to hear the words well in advance of what was being spoken or what was being written. And they said it's time to put down the pen and just start speaking verbally. And it wasn't long after that the Pleiadian Collective came in, and they're my primary group that I work with when I work publicly. But like you mentioned, there are a lot of beings that I work with. It depends on what I want to know about, and so it's. I just met some new beings the other day when I sat down before a private session with a client. So a new group came in from Cassiopeia. So that was interesting. So there are always new beings rotating in depending on what I want to learn and what I want to know about. So it's hard to believe, but it's been over 20 years now, and it's been a real journey.
It's so exciting. I saw some interviews with you when I was doing research on your work, and you said that you mostly channel galactic beings and angelic beings, but not so much. Channel or have contact with people who have passed on because they're in another realm. And I was wondering, so what kind of realm are they compared to the galactic beings?
Well, what I'm already hearing is that it's kind of a loaded question because it depends on someone who's passed away. It's what aspect of that soul are you connecting with? And usually there's a level of that consciousness, whether you're connecting with that higher aspect or whether you're working with an oversoul. Those have two very different perspectives and two very different frequencies about them. So a lot of the groups that I work with, they're collectives, and many times they're closer in vibrational resonance and alignment with their oversoul as opposed to a higher self, which is kind of another fragmented version. As we come down from source energy, we're fragmenting. And so those who've crossed over, they're usually that level of consciousness that we're connecting with is slightly lower. It's not better, it's not worse, it's just a different perspective. And part of what I've contracted to do with my guides and these celestial beings is to bring in more information about the celestial energy and some of our galactic history. So it's just a slightly different perspective, those who bring in more of an angelic energy, they're going to speak to those who align with that vibe. And for me, it was working with the galactic energy specifically. But again, it's not better, it's not worse, it's just different.
Right, right. I understood that it was a big question in a way. And I wanted to ask you today actually about this multidimensionality. Because I hear all the time that or lately, that we exist on different planes at the same time, that we're multidimensional beings, and I hear about star seeds, and then I'm a little bit confused about, are we all, like, each human being, are they a multidimensional being, or is it just certain humans that are also or have this multidimensionality to them?
No, we all do, because ultimately all of us are part of source energy, and then as that we align at different points of existence with a particular identity as we enter into this universal structure of duality. We will align with, as I was saying before, either our higher self, or we'll align with an oversoul perspective. And then each of us has multiple lives going on at the same time. So it might be, a life on Earth. It might be a life in the Pleiades. It might be a life as an angelic being, because it's all concurrent. Time isn't linear. So, and that's a lot for people to kind of wrap their brain around sometimes. I think sometimes your head just hurts trying to think about it. But really, that's all going on concurrently, especially when we think about karma, or we think about, when somebody passes away, what happens? Is
Right.
there a progression into the next life? We're still looking at it from a linear perspective. And the guides always say, we'll answer your question based off of where your perception is right now. But really, that's not how it is, because they don't have to incarnate back in the 1500s and then the 1600s, 1700s. They can incarnate at any point where the soul gets to kind of explore and have the kind of experience that it wants to have. So a soul could choose to go back and, if we're looking at it from a linear perspective, incarnate into the 1300s and then project itself into 3,000 years ahead, and then go back again to 5,000 years back. So it's not necessarily linear. It's just where the soul can go to have the kinds of experiences that it wants to have. So all of us carry this energy, but we don't allow ourselves full access to that, because we want to play in this game, this illusion of separation, to see if we could figure out that it is a game. How far can we go in the illusion? And then can we bring ourselves out of it? And that's where we're at right now. We perceive ourselves as being separate, although it's not possible. But in order to play in that illusion, we partition off all of this awareness that we are part of source energy. So we'll say, I'm this little personality right here, and here's my story about who I am and what's happened to me. And then our reality is based off of that. So all of us have all those other lifetimes in different dimensions going on concurrently, but we kind of partition all that off to play the illusion of the game.
Okay, so what about like star seeds then? Aren't we all then star seeds in a way?
In a way, I think so, but I think there are certain energies and certain aspects or certain archetypal patterns that we want to pull in and bring into our experience. And I think that's what gets the label. So there are people who are really what the guides would call earth oriented. They really like connecting with Mother Earth, being out in nature. They're very, very grounded. And then you've got other people who would rather think about leaving their bodies and being out in other systems. They want to go home, and that's a big issue for a lot of us that are stellar oriented, that are star seeds, if you will, that we want to go home, but really it's about bringing that energy of home, which is really source energy, into this physical experience. So you've got people who are pulling in all of these different archetypal patterns or energies, and then we're giving them labels, because we love to label everything here, because it makes us feel safe. It makes us feel like we understand it.
Right. So the whole concept of reincarnation kind of lost its juice for me when when we started speaking about, you know, everything happens right at the same time. Like the past year, I've been hearing that again and again, and now it's just getting more real to me. And I'm like, what about reincarnation then? If you know, if I always thought it was behind me. But that's funny because I interviewed a wisdom keeper from the Andes, and he was saying that the past was ahead of him and the future was behind him. So I was like, well, what? So I guess it is a matter of perception, and that it is my mind that has just agreed to a certain concept, and then it's difficult to get out of it
Right.
in a way.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think for people when they have a really hard time, when they get lost in their head trying to think about it, if you can just kind of imagine that concept as an orb of light and then just drop it down into your heart, that when we're in that space, a lot of the questions and the chatter that we have about really understanding how that works, it just goes away and we feel content with an answer because there's a part of us that knows that this is really how things are, that time is an illusion that we get trapped in. So, you know, that's something that everybody can do when they feel particularly stuck with this one, because this is a big one. And the guides actually do spend a lot of time talking about the construct of time and how we build each now moment.
Right. So let's speak about the Pleiadians, because I've especially been very drawn to them for some reason. So I just read a little bit online about them, and many are saying that they actually look a bit like us, like human beings, and some of them are very Nordic looking, actually. But then I heard that you are saying that they are not physical. So then I was thinking maybe you are channeling some beings from the Pleiadians, because the Pleiadians are huge. I mean, there's tons and tons of stars there. So I was thinking maybe there are different levels there too.
Yes. So, as the guides explain it to me, their system is an open system. It's an open cluster of about 750 stars. So, that's a really large system. And, you know, we again like to put everything in a tiny little box. And it's actually a very vast system. And there are beings who look very much like us. A lot of the Nordics that you hear, the fifth dimensional Nordics, but there are also reptilians and bird people. And
Oh, there are reptilians
there
in the
are,
Pleiadians?
yes.
Oh, I didn't know. I
So
thought
there
they
are,
were somewhere else.
well, they are, but it's a vast system and it's varied. And the beings that I work with are actually ninth dimensional, so they don't have physical form. They're beings of light. And rather than incarnating to a planetary body the way that we do, they actually align with a stellar body. So, you know, they're not getting into a physical body and coming down, but rather their consciousness will work with the grid of the star. And they're proficient at working with records and information. They align with Alcyon, which is the central star in the Pleiades. And stars and planets work like libraries. So if you think about us as being kind of the paperback version that has all of our information, we're carrying it around in our field, then planets, the consciousness of the planet will contain the records of all the experiences of all the life that's on the planet, and then that information gets sent to the central star in the system. So ours goes to the sun. The sun would be the equivalent of, say, a main library, and an Earth would be a branch library. And then,
Sorry, are you saying that our information on Earth are going to the sun, our sun?
correct. Yes.
Like
So,
it's stored there in a way?
yeah.
Uh-huh.
So it's
Wow.
stored there along with all of the other planetary bodies. They kind of upload that information, and it can be readily found and easily accessed from that level. And then the sun will upload its information to Alcyon. So the particular group that I work with, they're beings of light, and this is what they focus on. They focus on working with the records and sharing information and wisdom. But then there are other groups of Pleiadians who have very different agendas and different paths and things that they want to work on. So I think it's really confusing for a lot of people because they'll get the idea of, oh, well, the Pleiadians are just the Nordics, or
Right.
you know, this species is only from here or there. our galaxy is very, very old, and there's been a lot of mixing of different races and species and different dimensions. So we'll hear one story, but also keep an open mind because it's a very big place. It would be like saying that people from America are only this particular way. They're either light or they're dark, or they're good or they're bad. And in all of these systems, they're both. They're beings who are kind of playing a lighter role or a darker role.
Oh.
So there are all these different agendas going on as well. So it's not that we can really put everybody in one tidy little box.
Yeah, I gotta admit that I thought that when we spoke about the Pleiadians, they were like maybe thousands of years ahead of us in their development, and I was like generalizing the Pleiadians, and I thought the reptilians and the Greys, they came from somewhere else. But it's my mind just trying to categorize things.
And that's when it goes to time, and we're looking for this idea of history of being a tidy little string, this linear story, and really it doesn't exist that way because time doesn't exist that way. So that's another thing when you get all this channeled information, and one story is vastly different than another story. In some ways we have the same problem here on Earth, where our past is always colored by the victor. It's always told by the victor. So you don't always hear another perspective or another side, and you kind of get locked into a version of the story. But the version that you're hearing or that you're tapping into is the one that's most important for you to hear, to apply to your life here and now. Because when we start hearing the stories of, oh, this happened in that system and this happened there, they're just nice stories unless you start paying attention to how you feel about the stories, and if there are patterns and lessons and things for you to take away from the story and apply to your own life. And I think that's really important for people to do when they come into contact with channeled information. You've got to use your own discernment and see what resonates with you and how does it apply to your own life.
Right. So what are the Pleiadians that you are channeling? What are they saying about Earth and human beings, and why we are here, actually? Like what we're, I mean, this is a huge question, but what we are moving towards. I mean, apparently they are observing us and they want to help us. So what do they want to help us with? Like, what's their message to us?
So they talk about Earth in terms of being kind of a grand experiment.
Oh.
And that it was set up, it's the third experiment in our galaxy, to see if we could go through this process of descension and reascension, if we could forget who we are, that we are part of source energy, and if we could descend down into this dimension of duality and see if we could come back out. And so we pull in all of these archetypal energies from different parts of our galaxy. And so what they're here to do is to help remind us that we are divine beings of light having this physical experience, and really how to use our discernment. That's a big part of their message, and how to be autonomous, not just to kind of follow the party line, but really how to learn to tap into our own power and our own wisdom. So really, it's about polarity integration. How do you release your judgments? How do you go back to that middle point of source energy? Because everything in this particular universe, it's two sides of the same coin. So how do you go back to seeing yourself as part of the coin as opposed to aligning with a side of the coin, if you will? So a lot of the work that I do with them is in helping to teach people how to look at their judgments and how to see how those judgments serve you, how they can be released, how you can shift your perspective on that so that you can go up to a higher level of awareness.
So I really want to go back and actually hear a little bit about the history of planet Earth, just to cover that a little bit, because it's so exciting. Because I just did an interview with Jamie Price. I don't know if you know her, but she channels Lyran Council of Time. And she told me a little bit about human history. And then I read about you, your work, and you're saying a lot of the same, which I think is very interesting. So can you tell us, because, from my childhood, belief, I thought just God just created us. But then I'm starting to believe that we're kind of created by these other beings, that we are a mixture of them, and that they, like you're saying, we were an experiment. So, did actually extraterrestrials create humans?
So there are a couple ways to answer that. So in some ways, yes, because all of us are extraterrestrial as well as being terrestrial. There are aspects of us that are helping to create and shape this world when it was originally created. So Earth had its own kind of blueprint, and it had its own program for growth and unfoldment and development. And when it was decided that Earth would be the location for the third grand experiment, some of that energy was shifted slightly. And the guides talk a lot about the Lyrans first coming here.
Right.
And they describe it in some ways as being kind of a vacation spot for Lyrans, that they wanted to get away and they wanted to experience some things because there were their own struggles and there were wars that went on in the Lyran system. And so the Lyrans came and they agreed to be part of this dissension project. And that's where a lot of the Lyran energy comes from. So about 400,000 years ago, a lot of that energy was brought to the planet, and then they came down into the fourth dimensional levels. And some of the Lyrans decided at that point to go to other systems, to go back off world. Some of them merged into Atlantis.
Right.
And
Okay.
and then as we came down through Atlantis, people always ask about where do the Anunnaki fit in, and
Right.
to where do the Nibiruans fit in. And from my understanding, as the guides explain it, at that point, a lot of that energy was on Mars. And they were waiting until the fall of Atlantis because they saw that things weren't going well, that they were going to take advantage of that. And there was further manipulation that was done with genetic material after that as well. But when Atlantis fell, a lot of that wisdom and energy and information was stored, and it was passed down 12 different lines. And we're just now bringing all of that back up today. But again, we pull in these archetypal patterns from all of these different systems. So there are 7 major systems with which we most closely align, and that's Sirius, Orion, Lyra, Cassiopeia, Andromeda, Arcturus, and the Pleiades. So those are the 7 big systems where we are pulling a lot of our genetic material from, because part of this game, we played the second experiment out in Sirius, and it didn't go very well. So we thought, if we have more genetic material, along with the genetic material, we'll have the emotional understanding, we'll have the emotional experience. So Earth is a bit different because on other planets they don't have the range of emotion that we have here. So the guides always call Earth the planet of emotion. If you want to go learn how to work with emotions, you go to Earth. That's the school for it. So along with these 7 major systems, there are thousands and thousands of worlds that have donated their genetic material. So all the life on Earth is holding all of these patterns and these experiences from all these different systems, that if we had all this variety, they thought it might be a little easier for us to figure out new and subtle ways to work on the issues we weren't able to integrate in other systems, whether it was control or whether it was authority, trust, acceptance, balance. So all of this energy that was deposited here in the form of life, we could access as records and information so that we could try to go through it again here ourselves. And it's really the process that we're going through. This is the nexus point, so that we can pull from all those lifetimes where it didn't go well, where we weren't able to forgive, where we weren't able to release our judgments.
So I guess that's why it's maybe very important for the galactic family to really help us, because they want it to go well this time in a way.
They do, because, and the thing that's hard for us to understand is that they're also learning from us.
Huh?
Because we think, oh, they're just teaching us, but really what we're learning how to do is hold compassion in a way that is, they say the breadth And the depth of the compassion that we're able to access at this level is so much greater than what higher dimensional beings access, which to us
Oh,
may sound a little strange, but because we know how difficult it is, because we know what that pain sensation is, and our heart goes out when you know that somebody else is really truly suffering, because we've had that experience ourselves, that we hold just such a greater container of compassion. And there are beings in our system that, if you look at the Greys, for example, they've lost their ability to access their emotions for a variety of reasons, but they're learning how to access that again through us and with us. And even in the ninth dimension, the Pleiadians say that they're learning so much about compassion in ways that
oh,
they just hadn't thought about it. So we're also teaching, and because we're holding a whole new level of compassion, it's altering the entire universe.
wow. Amazing.
Because, yeah, all of that information is holographic. So even though I was talking about the libraries being accessible from the Earth level or the star level, um, all that information is also contained within us. Everything that exists within the universe also exists within us. So as we change, we impact all of that energy.
Right. Can you tell us a little bit about frequencies? Because your website is called Higher Frequencies.
So Earth itself has a particular vibratory range, and when we're keeping our consciousness at a particular bandwidth, and when we're holding particular thoughts and beliefs, this is what creates our overall vibratory level. So if you're vibrating within this particular range, you're not going to be able to see any higher than where you're at. So it's actually very, very simple to change your frequency. The problem is that we don't maintain it. So if you want to shift your frequency, if you want to elevate it, it's really about moving out of the mind, the egoic mind, and moving into the heart center. So to do that, all you have to do is really think of something that makes you smile. And the guides usually recommend thinking of an animal, usually a baby animal, because that for most of us is going to put us right in that space. And when we get there, we usually feel really lighthearted or tingly, or we just feel really expanded. And it's in this space that we let go of all the limiting beliefs that lower our overall frequency. So it's not even so much that you have to figure out what your blocks are or your issues are. It's just about staying in vibrational alignment, because the essence of who you are is like this really beautiful light that is constantly inside you pulsing out, and it's divinely perfect. It's that spark of source. And then we cover it up to play this game with all these limiting beliefs. It's like having a dirty window, and if you're standing on the outside and and the light from inside the house is trying to shine out, it's going to look pretty dim if the windows are closed or if the windows are dirty. But when you start to clean those off, when you start to let go of those limiting beliefs, or if you shift into that space where you're in your heart center, they go away completely, then that light can shine out brightly. And the way that we create reality is that it's a reflection of our vibrational state. So if that bright light or that intense high frequency is shining out, that's what we're going to get back as our reality. That's how we create and manifest. So if you want to access the higher realms, and you want to see, you want to see,
I want to see them.
yeah, you want to see them. And to be honest, it's all about frequency. Everything vibrates, but what we do when we channel, and all of us have the ability to do this, is that we take that frequency as it comes to us, and we interpret it through one of the senses. So for most of us, we're going to see it, we're going to hear it, or we're going to feel it. I have met some people who taste, all right, they can taste or smell the energy, but most of us are going to run it through, we're going to hear it, we're going to see it, or we're going to feel it in our body. And we also have that sense of claircognizance, and I don't really give that a label because we're not running it through one of the senses, but all of us have the ability to do that. So when you are able to align with that authentic self, you either do it by putting yourself in your heart center or by letting go of those judgments that you're holding. then you can start to see into the higher realms, because you're moving yourself out of that range and you're opening up to receive those higher frequencies. They're always coming down. They're always they're always around us. We're just not open to perceiving it because we have to work with a different operating system. We have to work with the heart instead of the egoic mind.
Yes, and you're saying that everyone can channel, and what I have understood is that it's very important to go into the heart space, which you also mentioned, and to let go and to to get into your heart. But I'm wondering how you do that when we have all these belief systems, and I mean, and they can be pretty stuck there from your childhood or anything that are very real to you. And so I think in one way it's easy to raise my frequency for 5 seconds or 10 seconds and smile, but then my story catches up with me and I'm like, well, it's never going well with this or that. I mean, it's just an example. And I found that these belief systems, they are really strong. Like, even though you are aware of them, you still believe in them, because it's like you have this record or these experiences that show you that every time you did this happens. So it would kind of be a fairy tale to think otherwise. So I guess my question is actually, before we go into the heart space, like, how can you actually start to release old belief systems that don't serve you?
So there are a couple of ways that you can do this. One is to see actually how it does serve you, because even those limiting beliefs you're holding on to, because in some way, even if it's some neurotic belief that you think that it's helping you, and it may be helping you to stay safe. Maybe you're afraid of being seen or you're afraid of being persecuted, but you want to get out and you want to speak in front of people, and it's not happening because you've got this persecution program running. So the desire to stay safe is stronger than the desire to do the work at the moment because it's so primal. So it's really looking at how it serves you. Is it logical? Maybe not, because a lot of this stuff comes from other lifetimes, and we reinitialize those programs early on in childhood, sometimes even in womb. And we don't really have a point that we can say, oh, I set up my belief right here. So it's seeing, all right, so how does this serve me? And you can ask the subconscious, the way that this holding this belief serves me is, and you can either write it out or speak it aloud. That's going to help you to get in touch with the subconscious more than just having that conversation in your head. So that's one way. And then you can ask yourself how you want to repattern it, how you want to perceive it, what the new belief system you want to hold on to is, and then just keep reinforcing that. The guides say that it's really not necessary for you to go and figure out where something started. Your awareness that it's going on, and the fact that you're conscious that you've got a pattern is huge, and that's half the way there to shifting it. So if you say, all right, I know I keep holding this belief and I know it doesn't really serve me, so what do I want instead? It really is about practice, and it's about repetition. So what is it that you want? If you know that you've got a control issue and you feel like you have to control everything, and what you want to work on is, I want to trust in myself, in my discernment. And by trusting in myself, I know that anything that I encounter, whether it's somebody who maybe doesn't have my highest good in mind, or whether it's any situation, I'll know, I'll have a sense that, oh, this isn't really what I want to do, or this isn't going to be good for me. And I'll know that I need to take action in another way. So you just start working with that energy and imagining it, and imagining what it would feel like. What will happen sometimes is the inner critic gets a little busy saying, no, we're not that way, and life doesn't work this way. So one way you can work around it is by saying, all right, well, what if it did? How would it feel if? And as you just start imagining that sensation, it doesn't matter whether you actually believe that's the way it is or you're imagining that's the way it is, you're still aligning and pulsing out the frequency. So, the guides always suggest this because it really is going back and letting go of those old programs. Yes, something might have happened repeatedly because your belief systems weren't different. You kept holding the same belief system, so you kept getting the same results. So you have to keep putting this in place, and sometimes it takes a while for it to start showing up, because again, you might have that illusionary belief that, oh, it's more important for me to be this other thing, this safety thing. Some beliefs can be kind of chained together. They can be bound together. And when you pull on one, it's like a house of cards. If you can find the corner card and you pull that, the whole thing comes down. But otherwise, you're taking them off one by one. It doesn't matter. You're going to get it done anyway. You're going to have the house dismantled, but it's just about how your soul feels most comfortable, or you at the ego level feel most comfortable about taking that apart and creating something else. Now, the more you practice what the frequency is that you want, you start to override those subconscious habits and belief systems. And that's one thing the guides have talked a lot about in the last, probably the last year and a half. That some of us will do our meditations in the morning, or we'll do it again at night, but we're not doing it through the day. We're not checking in through the day. So, we might be really up in the morning, and then we get to work and we start dealing with people, and we just start going downhill until we get to the end of the day and we're at rock bottom. And it takes a lot of energy to get back up. So if we start out, we check in. If we check in periodically through the day, how do I feel? Do I need to recenter myself? What's going on physically, emotionally, mentally? Is my body telling me that I have tension in it? My emotions, am I feeling in a funk? Am I sad? Am I blue? Am I angry? Am I frustrated? Or is my inner critic busy back there going, this stuff never changes. You're not good at this. Those are the kinds of tweaks that we need to make. So when we go up, we might drop out, but we'll make that adjustment and go back up. So by the time we get to the end of the day, we're much higher, and we're able to recalibrate and get where we want to be instead of it being such an effort. And the more often you're checking in, it starts to become a habit. And this is what fifth dimensional existence is. It's about being conscious every single moment of where your energy is. So if you want to get better at it, you got to start checking in more regularly. You don't have to spend 20 minutes of meditation. You can spend 30 seconds putting yourself back in your heart center and shifting your perspective again. So it's not about these long periods of time where we're doing these exercises. It's about maintenance of frequency more repeatedly through the day.
Right. Awareness and practice.
Yeah.
Well, that's a relief that you don't necessarily have to find what happened and when I was 3 years old,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was wondering, maybe if it was would be possible that you could bring the Pleiadians in if
Sure.
they're here.
They're almost always around.
They are.
Yes. Yes, they're definitely here.
So I don't know how that happens. So I guess you're in charge.
Yeah. So I will tell everybody just one thing. The Pleiadians do work with tone and sound. And that's part of the reason why they were waiting for me to channel verbally. And it's not any one particular dialect. It's just tones and sounds that resonate with you at a cellular level. Really, it's just some elongated vowels that they can modulate the frequencies. And that's why the dialect is different than my own. There's really no other reason other than that. So, yeah, give me just a moment to get into the space to bring them in, and we'll see where we go.
Wonderful.
Yes, hello, dear. This is the Ninth Dimensional Pleiadian Collective, and it is a pleasure and an honor to have the opportunity to connect with you. So, there is a lot of support for all of you at this moment. For those of you that are joining us now, those that are looking 6 months from now or a year from now, it doesn't matter. We're connecting with you in your version of the moment because, again, we don't experience time. So for us, it's just the now. But there is a tremendous amount of support for you. All of you have got your angelic guides, your celestial family. They're all with you. So we want to acknowledge that before we begin. But how may we best be of service to you today, dear? What would you like to know about?
Well, I would like to know before we start. Thank you for being here. It's an honor. I would like to know how to deal with the crisis in Europe right now. I'm from Norway, and we're experienced the migration crisis, and it's really difficult. And I look at the news, and there are so many horrible things going on, and it's difficult sometimes to just go into your heart and. I guess, and not go into fear. Because when we see everything is kind of chaotic in Europe, and you see the political systems and what's going on in America, and yeah, how can we actually deal with this without going into fear?
So, everything that you perceive at the collective level, whatever crosses your path, is there to be a reflection for your overall vibrational frequency. So, what you may get from a particular situation may be different from what someone else is getting because of the frequencies that you're running. So, for you, for instance, when you look at the situation in Europe, what is your most negative belief about it? What is your greatest judgment about it? So, in other words, what gets triggered for you? All right. For some of you, it may be a sense of powerlessness, that you feel that you don't have the power to change things. Or you might feel that there are limited resources. So competition may come up for you. Or you may feel a judgment about someone else not being worthy. There are all kinds of things that can get triggered for you. But what gets specifically triggered for you is what you get to work on. It's showing you what's still resonating within your own field that needs healing. It is some judgment that you've set up that denies your own divine light. So let us take the idea of competition, for instance. Competition is a perspective of limited resources, that you are operating in a finite universe. Sometimes it's obvious as far as, if I have food, then you have none. All right. If I win, then you lose. That's one way to look at competition. But also, it can be that if you succeed, that means that there's not enough for me to be successful as well. And it's shifting your perspective to see that you're living in a finite universe. So, the first step for all of you is looking to clean up your own house, so to speak. Deal with what is going on within you. That's the first step to creating change at a global level. And then it's taking action that's in alignment with that belief system. So that can be different for all of you. So, what do you feel that you need to do in order to be in alignment with your belief, your new belief that you want to hold? That may be getting involved with something politically, it might be speaking out. It can happen in many, many different ways. It doesn't have to be in what you perceive to be the direct path to that issue. So perhaps if you are finding that you're triggered about lack of resources, perhaps that means you also dealing with something, same issue, different mask, different look on the front of it. Maybe you start supporting educational systems where there is a lack of resources or funding that seems available, that you feel that you can allow that to happen, or that you are allowing yourself to give unconditional energy, all right, that you're not cutting off your energy field, that you have unconditional love to give. All right, because honestly, at the end of the day, absolutely every issue you have is about unconditional love and loving yourself unconditionally. All right. So take what you see collectively. The issue on the surface may look very different to how it plays out in your personal life, but if you start looking at it, you're going to notice that, yes, indeed, you're playing out in several areas in your life. All right. And then take action that's in alignment with your new belief system.
That makes sense. Thank you for that.
Yes.
Another question, a more personal one for me, actually. Do I have a special connection to the Pleiadians, or is it something I'm just imagining?
No, you've spent a lot of time in that system. And for you in particular, it's about accessing information and records and the dissemination of that information. This is part of the archetypal energy that gets pulled in from the Pleiades. So for those that feel aligned with that system, generally you are very interested in records, in information, what's happened in the galaxy. You're interested in teaching and disseminating information. One of the challenges for those of you who have spent time in the Pleiades is also really learning the lesson of boundaries. Where is your place as far as, it's not your responsibility to fix everything for everybody else. You're taking away their lesson by trying to fix it for them. So there are lessons that you might also find that get pulled in from that system as you align, as you're someone who says, this feels very familiar to me. All right. So we would say also that some of you say, well, am I from this star system or from that star system? And really, you're not from a star system. That's just another level of the game, if you will. It's really important that you see yourself as identifying as source energy, as creator energy, because that will allow you to stand in more of your power. And that's really what you're learning to do, to access your personal power.
Right. This is also a personal, along the same lines. Have I ever been abducted?
You've spent time on many of the ships. We would say for you, you have agreed to play with the Gray Hybrid Project. All right. And there are lots of hybrid projects going on, and there are different sects of Greys. Some of them are working with Pleiadians, some of them are working with Draconians, some of them are working with a variety of different groups, and they all have their different agendas and different ways of wanting to work. But yours, yes, you have played. You played around with that, with the hybrid project. You have participated. Now, the hard part for you all is remembering that at the soul level you agreed, because at the soul level you look at these species and you see them dying out, and there is a part of you that doesn't want to see that happen, that you want to be part of the solution because you figure you're not going to remember everything when you get down here to Earth. The problem is that you are starting to remember because your frequency is getting higher. And so the veil is thinner, as it were. And so some of the ways that you used to forget, it's seeping through into your consciousness. And it's a bit like we always describe it like a surprise party, where you are stepping into the room and your friends are there, and they are shouting at you, and in that moment you're startled and you close down. And then you take a breath and you say, these are my friends. All right, you recognize them. Well, the problem is you're not recognizing your friends. You're just going into that startled state, and the trauma is not being released. And that's why all of you are carrying so much trauma around a lot of what's being done as far as the hybrid projects themselves are going, because many of you are going off on ships and having experiences that aren't quite as traumatic because the same kinds of things aren't happening. You're not donating genetic material. So it's a bit of a mixed bag with that. But yes, you have played around with the hybrid project and those beings.
Is that over now?
No, the project is still going on. It's not happening in exactly the same way that it once was. Because again, there are different sects of these projects that are going on. For those that are a bit more respectful of you and your energy, they're not happening in the same way because they understand that the trauma is really on the surface, that it's becoming more and more difficult for you to not bring back the trauma. All right, that's the best way that we can say that. There are other sects that aren't quite as interested in your vantage point, and that's really they don't have the emotional capacity to understand. It's not happening in such a frequent way as it once was. All right.
Right. Another question. Do we plan our lives before we come down here? Do we kind of, as humans or multidimensional beings, set up a plan for this life and agree on which souls to participate with in this life? For instance, whom we're going to marry and what family we're going to go in, be born into, and what our main lesson would be?
So yes, you create a blueprint for yourself. And this lifetime in particular is a little different because you're going through this integration process. And this is kind of the nexus point where all this energy is coming together. So from our vantage point, we would say that it's almost as if you had a pre-shift and a post-shift blueprint. And it's almost as if you have two blueprints for yourself because you're moving into a different paradigm, a different way of playing the game. And so you needed a different blueprint. So really up until the end of 2012, as you entered into 2013, 2014, you started activating this secondary blueprint. All right. So for many of you in this time, you might feel like the old version of you it doesn't fit any longer. The things that you thought you wanted to do with your life, the things that you thought that you were passionate about, all of that started to change and alter because you are bringing on this new blueprint, if you will. Now, yes, you create a blueprint, but it doesn't mean that you don't alter it. And you can think about it how you would build a house. There are certain rooms that you want in the house, but how you choose to decorate it or renovate it, for that matter, is entirely up to you when you're here. So this lifetime also, in particular, is a little different as far as your relationships go, because there were so many things that you wanted to integrate, that you wanted to release judgment from many, many lifetimes with other people, that you left a lot of that to be very, very flexible because you knew it would be a very rapid growth process and you weren't sure where you were going to be. So in other words, were you going to be at a particular place at a particular time to meet up with someone else? Now, there are many people who will be your match. All right. It's not that you just have one person and that's it, especially this lifetime. That there are many people with whom you can experience deep and boundless love with. And it was, where are you at? In order to have a relationship, you have to have a certain number of points of common interest, of vibrational alignment, in order to sustain the relationship. And if someone else is not working on the same stuff at approximately the same time, then you're not a match. But you had backup plan after backup plan after backup plan for yourself. So, you stayed flexible. And those contracts, if you will, they're very malleable. You all think of contracts as being eternally binding, but really it's akin to you making a choice to have coffee with a friend. And if that friend can't show up, it's not a big deal. You either go by yourself or somebody else shows up to join you. So you make those adjustments. You make those adjustments. All right. So does that help answer that question?
Yes. But I'm thinking, is it so that some contracts are more solid than others?
Yes, there are certain things that you were really clear that you wanted to achieve. And so some things really you'll feel a very strong pull or very strong guidance that something is definitely on your list to experience. All right. But yes, you choose your family. You get exactly the parents that you want to help reinitialize all your limiting beliefs because they've got those programs going on. Your genetic line has those programs going on. So you choose all of that to get you started, to get the ball rolling. And yes, there may be certain things in particular ways that you want to do, but this lifetime is actually pretty flexible. That's also something else we want to talk about very briefly. For many of you, you have it in your mind that if you don't get something in a particular way, you're never going to get it. So this we see as an issue in your process of manifestation and how you perceive things to be manifest and created. So if what you want is to experience freedom, to experience abundance, to experience passion, for instance, and you're thinking that it's a job and the job looks a particular way, it's got to be with this company, it's got to be this position. If you get locked into the form, then you're missing out because your part in creation is about the modulation of frequency. It's about pulsing out frequency, observing the frequency as it's presented to you in physical form, and stepping out to engage in it. That's all that is your responsibility for manifestation. The universe is responsible for bringing the form to you. So you can also think of it this way, that the gifts that you want, the abundance, the freedom, the passion, it's a gift in a box. All right. The box is the form that it's coming in. And you've got it in your mind that it's a striped box with a big red bow on it. So you're watching for that to come by. You're watching. You're not paying attention to the frequency. You're not monitoring your vibration. You're looking for the form. Well, 49 boxes have gone by with exactly what you wanted vibrationally, but not in the box that you were asking for. And so you missed all those opportunities, which would have been exactly what you wanted. And you had to wait a longer period of time to get it because the universe had to arrange it in that form, which required a different timing and a different energy expenditure. So it's really important that you let go of this idea of form, whether it's relationships, whether it's a person that you feel that you have to be in relationship with, whether it's a job, or whether it's an experience. Focus on the vibrational essence of what you want and then be open to the form that it appears in, because sometimes the form that you get can be even greater than what you asked for or even imagined. And when you create your blueprint, it's based off of these vibrational frequencies. It's not based on a form. All right.
Okay, so kind of surrendering to something bigger, that something bigger will help you and take over in a way, instead of because someone are saying, you should know what to order in a way, like you go into Starbucks and you want a coffee latte with extra foam, and then you'll get that from the universe, that you have to order something from the universe. But you're saying more just surrender and just trust that it will come in the best possible form for you.
You can do both. You can focus on the form as you're imagining it, but you also have to generate the feeling of having it. The feeling state is vital to the manifestation process. So it's not just the picturing, it's the feeling as if you're having it. That's the vibrational essence. What would it feel like? What's the quality? And then you can see it in your mind, because that helps you sometimes get very clear about the vibration. But then you have to let go of your expectation that that's exactly how it's going to come. It's the expectation that creates the pain for you. Because there really is no such thing as failure. Failure is when your expectation of a vibrational experience doesn't match. And to be honest, when you step into any experience, it is never going to be identical to what you imagined. It never is. What you consider to be successful is when it's relatively close. If it's very different from what you imagined in your mind, then you give that the label of failure. What we would encourage you all to do is to just simply be curious about life. What would it be like if? What is this frequency like? Then you're not expecting. When you expect and you are attached to that expectation, that's when you have all kinds of problems, because the expectation is not about the frequency. Your expectation is really attached to a form. If you all really look at it, if you focus on being happy and joyous and experiencing the qualities, you'll find that you have them and that you are feeding that. But what creates the problem is when you expect it in a particular form. Now, we also want to say one other thing here, and that is that when you are desiring something, pay particular attention to what it is that is driving you. Are you attracted to something because you're curious about it and you wonder what would it be like to step into that frequency? Or are you attracted to it because you want to avoid this other thing over here that doesn't feel so good? So if you are driven, let's say abundance, for example, I want money because I don't want to be poor and suffer. If that's how you've got it set up, guess what you're going to create? You're going to create more of that suffering because you're holding judgment, and that creates an attraction. But when you're curious, you're not attached to anything, and it's much easier for you to manifest and create. Sometimes what you ask for is of a very high vibrational nature, and in order to receive what you're asking for, you have to maintain the frequency. So if you've asked for something that's very high and you're saying, well, it's just not here, this stuff doesn't work, pay attention to what is showing up, because that is showing you what needs to be integrated in order to elevate your frequency to get you back to that delivery address for what you wanted. All right. So what you need is always in the moment. That's why, when you all ask us, what do I need to do to go through the ascension process? We say there are only two things. You need to be grounded and connected to your body. And for most of you that are connected and drawn to us, you are not grounded and connected in your bodies because you want to be out of your bodies. You're usually very sensitive. And one of the coping mechanisms was to shut off some of those lower chakras so you didn't have to feel. You weren't feeling as much what was going on in density. So you've got to be grounded and connected to your body, because two things happen. One, you're going to have an awareness of what's really going on, how you're feeling, what's going on, and also you're going to be able to remember and retain information as you're receiving it from the higher realms. So you've got to ground and connect, and then just be present in the moment. If you're doing that, everything else, and we mean absolutely everything else, takes care of itself. If you are going through your day and you are thinking about the future or the past, and it's not a time that you have set aside to really examine all of that, then you are resonating at some level of fear. You're operating from the ego, because you should be present in the moment. If you're present in the moment, you're in the heart center. Otherwise, you're in the operating system of the mind. And if you're thinking about the future, it tends to be control. If you're thinking about the past, it's shame, blame, or the shame, blame, or guilt that you're holding on to that you haven't let go of. All right. The more often you check in, where am I? Am I daydreaming about how I'm going to respond to my friend as soon as she's done talking? You're operating out of fear. All right. That's a subtle level of control. You want to be able to control what you're saying so that you don't look stupid, or that you don't want her to respond in a negative way to what you're saying, or that you need to think about it to make sure that you are accepted or safe. That's subtle control, and most of you play this out. But that looks very different on the surface to you trying to control your partner because you want a particular kind of food for dinner and you're trying to manipulate them into deciding for Chinese for dinner. All right. It looks very different, but it's the same underlying frequency. In some ways, my needs aren't going to be met, or I'm not going to be safe. I'm not going to be loved. I'm not going to be accepted. All right. So just have an awareness. The more you can check in with yourself to see, where am I vibrating? Am I present in the moment? No, I'm not. All right, great. Let me bring myself back to my present. How do I do that? I put myself in my heart center. I think of something that makes me smile. 5 seconds later, you're back in the present. You're not going to stay there for most of you. You're going to drop out, and you'll go back up. It's an ebb and a flow to this entire process. So don't beat yourself up to say, why can't I stay there? Because as you go up to those higher levels, anything that is unlike that starts to come up to be processed. And that drops you out. It gets your attention and it drops you out. So you're going to go through this process. You'll go up and you'll go down. And each time you go up, hopefully you stay up higher. You go up higher and you stay there longer. And when you drop, it's not as far and not for as long. All right. So be kind to yourselves.
Thank you. That was interesting. So can you say a little bit about death? Because many people are afraid of dying, and I've interviewed many people who have had near-death experiences, and people are saying different things and some similar things. And I've been very curious about what happens to me when I die, and sometimes I go into fear and think that, what if I don't find my way through the world that I will pass into, or move into. Maybe I'll just get lost somewhere, or will I find the light, you know? So can you tell us a little bit about death and what to expect?
Well, for most of you, at the soul level, when you're about to pass, it's not really death that you fear. In fact, there is a part of you that welcomes that, because you haven't reached, if you've reached that point, it's always a conscious decision at the soul level. All right, not necessarily at the ego level, but at the soul level. You said, I've done everything that I wanted to do in this particular form, in this particular way. I'm ready to exit. What the ego fears is the pain that's involved before that, whether it's an accident or emotional injury, physical injury. There's the fear about the pain, and the soul is actually dislodged most of the time before that, so you don't experience most of that.
Oh, okay.
But you all have your fear of pain. Pain is perception. So if you want to move out of a state of pain, you just simply have to shift your perspective, move into the heart center. From that level, you're not looking at something from a polarized view, which is what happens at the ego level. You actually are looking at it from a neutral stance, and all the pain goes away. And as you're going through the death process, this is actually what's happening. You're going back to your whole integrated state as a divine being, and you're aligning with that aspect of yourself, and you're not operating all those fear programs. All right. Now, the moment you cross the veil, if you will, you have an awareness that you are part of all that is. You have an awareness that you are part of source energy. Now, depending on what programs you have, depending on what hasn't been integrated, you can still perceive this in this flash of an instant several different ways. For some, if they're running a lot of programs that are very heavy, what you will feel in that moment is the ripple effect that went out and what everyone felt as a result of your actions. This is what gets termed purgatory or hell. All right? You have an awareness of all of that when you actually go through the full death process, not just a near-death experience, but the full death process itself. And when this happens, to the ego, as we tell you this, some of you are horrified, thinking, "Oh, this is awful. I'm going to stay here forever." To the soul, it's but a breath. All right. And there is also an objective viewpoint that can also happen. Now, depending on how much your programs are still running, how deeply ingrained you were, it may take you a second breath before you recognize that it's an illusion. All right. Before you have that full awareness. Others of you, it's immediate, especially if a lot of that ripple effect, as you access, what you're feeling is a lot of love and the gratitude that you extended out. This is what gets the term of heaven. Really, heaven and hell don't exist, all right? In some ways, we would say what you term as heaven is a state of being. What you term as hell is a state of being. So it's all about your state of being, which is your sense of connectedness, and that's what you give the term of heaven to. So for us, as you ask us, am I going to find the light? Really, it's about surrender, because the natural flow of energy is to surrender to your natural state of being, which is the oneness. All right? As you reconnect, that's the natural flow. As you resist it, that's what you're trying to perpetuate, that sense of separation. And that's where some souls, again, if they're really identifying, they're really struggling. They're identifying with all of those old programs. And that happens usually through deep, deep, deep trauma. Then they won't allow themselves to reintegrate. But for most of you, it would be as easy as, floating downstream. It's not complicated. It's the natural way. And you have an awareness of, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. That's the other part. All right.
Thank you for that. That was, but it cleared up a little bit for me. And I think that's what I've been hearing a lot. And also that we are carrying things over to the other side if we don't work with it, like you're saying, programming. And my conclusion is that it's important that we actually work on ourselves here on the physical plane, that we take this journey in a way seriously, that we look into ourselves, because if we don't, we will just carry it on.
Well, we want to make this point, and it's wonderful you brought this up, because there's no right or wrong here. If you choose not to look at your stuff while you're here on this planet, it's an equally valid choice.
Okay.
All right. There's a lot of judgment that gets set up by those who are playing the light end of the spectrum about the dark. And there's a lot of judgment about the dark. And you, in a dualistic universe, you cannot have one without the other. So those that are playing the dark end of the spectrum are doing so that they can reflect your light, so that you can see your own light. And they are also the ones that are going to have to process through this heavy energy. So oftentimes the people who do the most dastardly deeds, who are the mirror for you, are the ones who love you the most on the other side, because they're still going to have to process through this energy. And you can't play a victim unless someone else is willing to play your perpetrator. You either use another being or you use nature, one or the other. You use nature or others as your reflection. So for those of you that want to go along the ascension path, do not judge those who are not going on that path with you. They are still having their own soul growth. It's in a very different way than you're having yours, but it's just as valid. It's just as important to the understanding of the universe, to the game, to the expression. And the reason most of you get so triggered and activated is because you believe that if someone is having an experience that is different than your own, that somehow you're going to have to suffer. You're going to have to live with the consequences of their choices. And this is where an understanding of time becomes so important, and how your now moment is created. So if we've got time, we'd love to talk about it very briefly. But
Sure.
Every now moment is built on an agreed upon set of circumstances that you say collectively has occurred, and personally this has occurred. This is what I deem as my past. So collectively we've experienced World War I, World War II, and then personally I had these experiences when I was a child and as a young adult. And this is the framework. It's the vibrational foundation upon which you build your now moment and how you perceive what is going on outside of you. All right. It's the filters through which you are perceiving reality. Now, if you think about the now moment as being a dot, everything that has ever been is a dot in reality. All right. So even though you created a blueprint for yourself, every choice you make, going left or going right, is an option. And you, when the choice became available, it was as if it was started to be created and manifested. You didn't experience going to the left because you focused your consciousness on going to the right. And so you think that is the only dot, it's the only version that's in existence. And you connect all these dots to give yourself a line. You give yourself the illusion of linear time. Really, all of these dots exist on the surface of a giant sphere, so to speak. So if you can imagine it all as being a sphere, and you're on a dot that's on the top. And again, as we said, the agreed upon past was that there was World War II and World War I, and these things happened to you. But there's a dot on the other side of the sphere where World War I didn't happen. All right. And so it created a very different version of reality. It is possible for you to put your consciousness on that version. But for most of you, you're not going to go there, because to go there would pull yourself out of the illusion of the game. The game is linear time and the perception of separation. So what you will do is you will make small incremental moves to put yourself on a now moment that is very similar in frequency to the previous one. But you can change them dramatically. And when you have dramatic changes, whether that's you letting go of a belief system, you're changing your story of what you think is possible. So if you're someone who says, you know, my results in the past told me that this keeps happening, and so this is how it's going to be, you've decided it's a story you're telling yourself. So the moment you start to tell yourself a different story by believing that something else is possible, you change the foundation upon which your reality is created, and you get a different reflection.
Wow.
So those of you who are judging the dark, or you're looking at the planet and you're saying, you know, look at all these horrible things that are going on. From a purely high vibrational perspective, everything that's going on is absolutely valid. And to the soul, it's really fascinating. Some of the most fascinating experiences that you've had are when you've done the darkest deeds, because it's so unlike your awareness of yourself as being part of the whole and experiencing unconditional love. So to the soul, it's a valid choice and a very educational one. For those of you who look around and you're judging all of this, look at all these people who are unconscious, look at all these things that they're doing, that it, it's just wrong what they're doing to the planet. It's not wrong. It's a valid choice, and it may not be the choice that you want to make. So put your life in alignment with those higher choices, but don't make them wrong, because making them wrong or judging them is going to keep you in that loop, and it's not going to allow you to create a higher version of the planet. All right? That's a higher concept. So take action in your life that is in alignment with what you would like to see as your reality, rather than judging those who are choosing something else. And the world can be in chaos. That doesn't mean that you have to be. You can be experiencing peace and love and joy and happiness and abundance, while the rest of the world may be experiencing something else. You are choosing to put yourself on a particular dot because that's the dot in which you are going to have the greatest potential for soul growth and to be of the greatest service. So sometimes for those of you that we're speaking with, and for those of you who have a higher perspective, you're choosing to be in a space that is chaotic so that you can be the living example of how not to be that frequency, to help elevate and lift others up. But for some of you, you will look at the world, you'll get depressed, you'll say, why bother? I'm going to suffer because I'm on this version of the planet with everybody else. No, you don't have to choose those frequencies. Choose something else.
That was really powerful. I have a feedback here again, but is there anything you want to say to us or to my viewers?
Trust in yourselves. A lot of you are going through a transition where you're feeling a lot of your passion is missing, that you feel a bit lost. Go back to the vibrational essence. Part of what you've forgotten, you understand in the process of manifestation that your thoughts create form, but you've forgotten that the emotions create form as well. They drive it into being. So you don't have to wait for an external circumstance to be generated in your life for you to feel a particular way. If you want to be happy, it's not waiting till something happens to make you happy. Feel happiness in the body now. You're pulsing that out. The universe responds and reflects that back to you. And then it reinforces the emotion. You're forgetting the first step. You're waiting. So for those of you who are missing your passion at the moment because things are shifting, and honestly, you've forgotten how to be creative. You've suppressed a lot of that creativity because you're afraid that you're going to be judged. Do something creative just for the sake of being creative for 5-10 minutes a day. That will help you. That will help to reignite some of your passion, because it puts you back in the heart center when you're just creative for being creative, not for writing a masterpiece, a painting, a majestic piece of art. It's about just exploring. And you did this as children. You've just forgotten how to do it as adults. And so a lot of your passion has waned. So imagine, what would it feel like if I could feel passionate? And if you're really down in the dumps, it can take a while to get you back up. All right. But you can start to elevate yourself a bit. All right. Just keep setting that intention. Set your intentions when you wake up in the morning. What do you want to experience throughout the day? Pick a frequency or two, and then acknowledge it through the day. You can reset it again through the day. I want to experience more compassion, or I want to experience more passion, or laughter, or amusement, or abundance, or pick any frequency. And then at the end of the day, acknowledge the places that you got it. It might be very small. It might not look the way that you thought it was going to, but acknowledge where it shows up, and that will help you to expand upon that frequency. You have to acknowledge it so that you can receive more of it. So we leave you with that thought. But you all have a tremendous amount of support on the other side. All you have to do is ground, put yourself in your heart center, ask your question and listen. It's going to feel like your imagination at first because you're not used to working with subtle frequencies, but go with it. All right. And then ask for confirmation. We'll put it in your path until you get it or you no longer want it. And if you wonder, is this my confirmation? Then take it as such because the thought wouldn't cross your mind otherwise.
Huh.
All right. So you can call on us directly. You don't need Wendy. All right. You can call us the P's, Mrs. P, if it's too hard for you to think of us as a collective or a collective of about 2,500 beings. It doesn't really matter. You're finding us through frequency. We don't really use names on the other side. You identify with frequency. And until then, dear ones, we will be watching and waiting and sending many, many well wishes.
Thank you.
It's our pleasure.
So that was really powerful, Wendy. They really explained things so thoroughly, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, they really want us to understand this concept of time and how we create the now moment, because when we get that, it makes it much easier to kind of shift all those other little things. So they like to talk about time a lot.
Yes, and it's coming more and more. So I'm hearing, bits and pieces about this, but from many different angles. So it seems like it's coming forward for us to actually start to embrace.
It's time.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for your time. This was really wonderful and awesome. I learned a lot today. And I also like to hear that you're saying a lot of the same things as I've heard from many other people, just with a few different words. So the same stories kind of coming from different angles again. And I like that. And it really resonates with me. So thank you so much for your work. I mean, it's really brave doing what you're doing. I mean, I just got to say that. That's truly brave. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure. To me, it's the new normal. So I think everybody does it.
Yeah.
So, I thank you for saying that.
Yeah. And thank you for being here, and good luck with all your wonderful work.
Oh, thank you. You as well.
And thank you so much for watching, guys. Much light from Oslo. Bye-bye.